Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for hanging in there until our keynote address this evening. I've been very happy with the presentations that I've heard so far in the conference, so congratulations to everybody for presenting such lively, interesting papers. It's really a pleasure for me to introduce Catherine Malabou to you this evening. She is a professor of comparative literature and European languages and studies at UC Irvine, as well as a professor of philosophy at Kingston University and in the United Kingdom. Let's see, I guess her most recent book is based on her Welleck lectures a couple years ago at UC Irvine, and it's entitled Morphing Intelligence, and out with Columbia University Press. Her remarks today are entitled Mutual Aid at the Age of Contemporary Anarchism. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Telos, all the people from Telos for inviting me. I'm very pleased and honored to be here. So, in my presentation this evening, I intend to talk about cryptocurrencies, anarchism, and mutual aid. So, in the first moment, I will argue that cryptocurrencies announced an anarchist turn within capitalism that put capitalism at war with itself. And in a second moment, I will bring to light the ambiguous nature of such an anarchism that appears on the one hand as libertarian or anarcho-capitalist, and on the other hand, liberal. In an article from May 2018, John McAfee, an internet expert, argues that we are witnessing today a genuine war against cryptocurrencies. The list of enemies fighting these currencies includes, he says, governments, banks, credit card companies, as well as the SEC, Security Exchange Commission. These institutions have allied in order to thwart the development of what he calls the crypto renaissance. The number of banks and lenders have allegedly interrupted payments in electronic currencies. McAfee exhorts crypto believers, the ones he calls crypto believers, to take a stand. And I quote, "What can we do? Take action. Write to your congressman. It sounds silly, but while they are still in power, make them work. Go into your bank and demand that they allow crypto transactions. If they say no, ask them to recommend a bank that will. Demand the credit card companies allow crypto payments." End of quote. Later in his article, he invites internet users to sign an extraordinary text that was recently published online in a number of different languages called the Declaration of Currency Independence. So this document is anonymous and it's circulated on the web. And of course, this document is strikingly similar to the United States Declaration of Independence. Both begin with the same formulation, when in the course of human events. So I quote, "When in the course of human events, it becomes apparent that the bands of control and power stem from a universally common source, the necessity of separation from these powers becomes a matter of survival. The time has come to challenge the state's monopoly on the fabrication of money and the control of currency flows. To deconstruct the link between geography and money, that is, to deconstruct money's national, or in the case of the euro, for example, international assignation, and to put an end to the privilege enjoyed by central banks and all the organisms that depend on them." So the declaration goes on, "The expenditure of energy by man, machine, and nature is the sole source of value. These sources and their results have been devalued through the international inflation of printed currencies. money and currency, as understood by the global population, are no longer an expression of the collective output of exertion, but rather an arbitrary calculation of unaccountable individuals and organizations that hold them in their influence. Humanity has fallen under their domination. This declaration of currency independence, the quote is almost finished, is a direct response to the continued manipulation and destruction that stems from the deliberate degradation of value across the whole humanity. We, the undersigned, will dedicate our lives to building networks and systems that restore the integrity of value. End of quote. So I signed this declaration personally. When I saw it, I signed it. So I want to explain why I did it. So you had to sign it. You had to sign it on the blockchain, and I will explain immediately. By cryptocurrencies, the authors are referring not only to the most famous Bitcoin, but also to multiple other cryptocurrencies that exist. By the term networks and systems, the declaration's authors have also in mind the technology that serves as a platform for these currencies, the blockchain. Recall that the blockchain, which emerged as a response to the financial crisis of 2008-9, is a distributed ledger technology. And someone was asking about technology this morning, and I think this is important for today's vision of mutual aid. So it's a distributed ledger technology, a kind of record, in which anyone can write, carry out, and verify transactions, albeit without the possibility of modifying or erasing previous transactions. These transactions are recorded and stored in the form of blocks, that is, numerical containers, which are assembled in chains and distributed across multiple computers and protected from fraud thanks to an electronic consensus between participants, or nodes. The participant in the blockchain is a node. So the blockchain is the foundation of cryptocurrencies. Cryptography is the procedure by which a sender transmits an encrypted product to a receiver who then deciphers the product with the help of a key. Transactions occur peer-to-peer without the mediation of a third party. The register belongs to everyone and no one, while its functioning is decentralized, anonymous, and secure. So there remains little public awareness of what is at stake in this monetary and cybernetic phenomenon. The reason for this is no doubt has to do with the high degree of technical sophistication that cryptocurrencies imply. The functioning of the blockchain, as of the mechanisms for the creation of cryptocurrencies, is not easy to understand and requires a process of initiation. It is reasonable to think, however, that this difficulty will be overcome in time, because after all, we did overcome the difficulty of the internet. So I think that it is crucial to see that far from being a purely technical issue, the development of cryptocurrencies is in fact a major political and social issue, and that is why it is most often repressed and not explained. When the authors of the Declaration of Currency Independence associate Bitcoin and the blockchain with what they call the recreation of value, it is obviously not in the name of a return to some sort of gold standard. It's not an issue of recreating this kind of gold value, because cryptocurrencies are totally dematerialized and have no tangible form. With cryptocurrencies, value, which is limited neither to price nor to the exchange rate, arises from a phenomenon that is simultaneously effective and symbolic, which is the reliability of the algorithm, which thereby takes the place of human confidence. Indeed, in his founding text, the famous, not existing Satoshi Nakamoto, nobody knows who he is, the creator of the Piccone. So in his founding text, Nakamoto speaks of the disappearance of the notion of confidence, of human confidence. And I quote, he says, the electronic payment system is based on cryptographic proof instead of trust. In another passage, he writes, we have proposed a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. So we see that the reliability of the algorithm allows value to return in the form of transparency, electronic transparency. However, and this is what the war is about, contrary to what the Declaration of Currency Independence might have us think, the war of states and banks against cryptocurrencies does not pit evil against good, nor the unjust against the just. It is rather an internal war. An internal war, a war within capitalism. Because the enemies are brothers. In fact, what we are witnessing today, this is my interpretation, is a conflict internal to capitalism, which is entering a new phase. Today, capitalism is beginning its anarchist turn. How else are we to describe such phenomena as decentralized currencies, the end of the state's monopoly, the obsolescence of the mediating role played by banks, and the decentralization of exchanges and transactions? It is clear today that all monetary sources are inaccessible to banks' clients. We don't know where the money comes from. If we wanted to inquire about that, there's a total secrecy of when the state fabricates new currencies or what credit comes from, etc. There's a total secret. And so precisely this is what the defenders of cryptocurrencies are fighting against. With the phenomenon of cryptocurrencies, there has also appeared so-called money agitators that are some sorts of political groups who, in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, challenged the bank's monopoly. So there are 5 major movements in this agitation. So I will very quickly list them. The first goes by the name of modern monetary theory. Its representatives affirm that it is contradictory for governments to say that they have to take money in the form of taxation, while banks can in fact indefinitely create money. So, and this is true, it's a contradiction that banks need, the state needs taxation in order to create money, when we perfectly know that banks can create indefinite amount of money. The second tendency is that of the reformers. According to them, the excessive power possessed by banks creates constant instability. It was the banks who effectively plunged the world into financial crisis in 2008. American reformers include the American Monetary Institute, the group Positive Money, and the International Movement for Monetary Reform. So this was the second one. Next, we have the cryptocurrency crusaders, a very heterogeneous group who nevertheless share a single idea, the rejection of national banking systems, credit included. Then the fourth one is the defenders of local forms of currency, the localists. And we have that in France, in certain regions. We have some local monies, like in Brittany, for example. And they also express skepticism towards government and banking systems. According to them, small communities, rather than algorithms, should control the flow of money in a closed circuit. And the final group is made up of members of what is called the Crypto Credit Alliance, who brings together cryptocurrencies and mutual credits by the way of the blockchain. So we could detail the specificity of each of these movements, but I just want to say that there are several movements today that really challenge the monopoly, the state monopoly over currency. In light of this phenomena, and now I'll turn toward anarchism proper. In light of this phenomena, it is not surprising to see the semantics of anarchism emerge in the management literature. a number of introductory books have appeared lauding the coming of capitalist anarchy with the development of blockchain and Bitcoin. One in particular, Patrick Schwerzfeger's work, AI, Anarchy, Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain, is an interesting example. He says this is an Uberization of the economy without the company Uber. It's an Uberization of the Uber that allows him to affirm that, I quote, anarchy is within sight. In the United States, the plethora of articles pose the question of Donald Trump's anarchism. Is Trump an anarchist in chief? Asked one journalist in reference to an interview with Michael Moore titled Donald Trump, an Anarchist at Heart, in which Moore comments on his film Trumpland. The paradox is, of course, striking, even shocking. How can we speak of anarchy in a period marked by the growing and unprecedented concentration of power? And yet, when political journalists and experts ask if Trump is an anarchist, they are not playing with words. They are attempting to circumscribe, more or less successfully, what the whole world is experiencing, and the new crisis of capitalism, the combination, at one senseless, monstrous, and unprecedented, of savage verticality on the one hand, and uncontrollable horizontality on the other. So, for me, the paradox is that ultra-nationalism thus signals the death agony of national authority. And the flourishing of cryptocurrencies is just a sign of this extremely strange situation. It will be said that when I speak of anarchism to describe the situation, it will be said that this is a right-wing or libertarian form of anarchism. An anarchism that, as I said, is also often called anarcho-capitalism or cyber-anarchism. And it is true that the authors of another article called Trust, Anarcho-Capitalism, Blockchain and Initial Coin Offerings highlight the direct link between Bitcoin, blockchain, and the Austrian school. I quote, "We argue that blockchain can trace its philosophical roots to the anarchy-capitalist strain of the Austrian school. Hayek, for example, abandoned his former belief that it was necessary to control the abuses of the state as regards the monetary system. He ended up calling for what he terms the denationalization of money." So in a certain sense, some the extremes of this Austrian school, I mean, the most radical thinkers, were already anticipated in this denationalization of money. It is not only the state, but the nation that is being disturbed by cyber anarchy. The authors of this article also ask the following question. What will happen to national borders if money is the same everywhere? How will governments raise taxes if revenue is anonymized by cryptography? How will the economy function without a central authority? Of course, the semantics of anarchism that give ultra-capitalism its new tonality changes nothing as regards to the logic of profit, with ultra-capitalism only expresses in a different form. So one might object that, yes, you're speaking of anarchism, but in fact nothing has changed. It's still capitalism for fide sera. And it is true that those banks that should logically be afraid for their survival have, of course, already seen the provisional advantages they can draw from the blockchain. The reduction in the number of agents and advisors they have to hire. An article in the Financial Times called 5 Ways Banks Are Using Blockchain insists on the fact that the new technology is indeed revolutionizing the sector, banking sector, not threatening it. So you see, it's extremely ambiguous. I think it is really ambiguous. This kind of anarchist turn of capitalism, does it strengthen capitalism or does it challenge it? But why, after all, not leave these enemies to finish each other off? Why did I sign this declaration? Personally, I'm not at all involved in the Austrian school. Why did I, a philosopher who's not a libertarian, sign it? Signing the Declaration of Currency Independence, and if I did it, it's because I think it's obviously a wager. Once again, we encounter the question of confidence. And it is true that I have the feeling that confidence is today is broken at all levels. I'm not well, I don't trust my bank anymore. But if I was only my bank. So what if the end of confidence, as Nakamoto is saying, were to revivify confidence? By guaranteeing transparency and protection, is it not true that the algorithms accomplish what institutions have prohibited, namely the possibility that both exchanges and money are our own in all senses of the term, that money, even dematerialized money, is in our hands. And it was a bit like what you were explaining this morning, David, like something that would help us to realize our own goals. With neither intermediaries nor middlemen, why not affirm that cryptocurrencies can also contribute to the common good? So, I would like to, I would skip the passage I had on the Internet of Things by Jeremy Rifkin, but I still want to say a word about Jeremy Rifkin, who has a very interesting book called The Zero Marginal Cost Society, in which he will precisely show the emancipatory potential of the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I quote, so in The Zero Marginal Cost Society, Jeremy Rifkin affirms that the new technological platforms are what he calls collaborative commons, able to foster new forms of mutual aid. Without going so far as to use the word anarchism, he insists on the change of paradigm that capitalism is currently going through. And I quote, a new economic paradigm, the collaborative commons, is rising that will transform our way of life. We are already witnessing the emergence of a hybrid economy, part capitalist markets and part collaborative commons. Between these two rival paradigms, the struggle will be long and implacable. End of quote. And I totally agree with this vision of things, like this notion of hybrid economy between two really opposed tendencies. So in order to give you an example of a possible liberal use of this electronic platform, I would like to turn to an experiment recently accomplished by two anti-capitalist philosophers that are influenced by Gilles Deleuze. Their names are Erin Manning and Brian Masumi. And so they are based in Montreal, and they use blockchain technology to develop a network of social and economic exchanges. Influenced by, as I just said, the work of Deleuze and Guattari, Manning and Masumi plan to create a network parallel to liberal economy. I quote one of their interviews. Going back to the question of value, we want to create an economy around the platform that does not follow any of the usual economic principles. There will be no individual ownership or shares. There will be no units of accounts, no currency or tokens used internally. The model of activity will not be transactional. Individual interest will not be used as an incentivizer. What there will be is a complex space of relation for people to create intensities of experience together in emergent excess over what they could have created working separately or in traditional teams. It's meant to be self-organizing with no separate administrative structure or hierarchy and even no formal decision-making roles. It's anarchistic in that sense, but through mobilizing a surplus of organizing potential rather than lacking organization. Everything is common. And so where do we stand today? And I'm moving to my conclusion. It's very difficult to exactly know where we are because the current monetary outlook is changing so quickly that it is becoming more and more difficult to understand the meaning of its evolution. When I was trying to reflect upon this phenomenon, it was about 3 years ago, Facebook had not yet announced the birth of its cryptocurrency Libra. I said Libra in French, I don't know, it's Libra, I mean, Libra. Nor that of its subsidiary company Calibra, which was tasked with managing Libra. This took place last year, June of 2019. So Calibra's main mission was, I said was, because in fact it was a failure. Many governments turned against it, and most companies quit it. But at the time, it was Calibra's main mission was thought of as having the capacity to develop an electronic wallet that could be used on the messaging services, WhatsApp and Messenger, through a dedicated mobile application. So it didn't work, but for sure, I think one way or the other, Facebook will have its own currency. It's obvious, I think, and the objective is always the same. Zuckerberg said we want to re-establish this kind of confidence without confidence just through the algorithm. And he says that social network then will really become social. So, of course, many think today that far from being decentralized, the use of Libra will be hyper-controlled by Facebook, whatever the company's claims to the contrary. Once again, we find the ambiguity. On the one hand, we'll have these horizontal platforms where we will be able to do whatever we want with it, and we can be in touch with anyone, and sell things, buy things without any control. And on the other, of course, we might have this kind of hyper-surveillance capitalist centralization. So that's why the Libra is still in discussion. But what is interesting regarding this ambiguity is what I read recently in the French journal, L'Echo, called When Facebook Becomes a State. And this is a description of Zuckerberg that I found very funny, because he says that on the one hand, Zuckerberg is an anarcho-capitalist, but on the other hand, he's a hippie. So I quote, "The former hippie communes of the 1960s, having failed to realize their utopian visions, will progressively be reincarnated through the constitution of alternative communities based in cybernetics. An extraordinary number has thus taken place between notorious visionaries, artists, hackers, scientists, and left-wing activists. And Zuckerberg is in between the anarcho-capitalists and these new visionaries." So it is indeed, once again, I don't have an answer, and I'm not presenting this as a kind of dogmatic vision, just as a, in fact, the expression of the world. It's frightening at the same time, because we are, I think, at the very heart of a paradox, or undecidable becoming. So once again, it is very, very difficult to know where the deconstruction of the idea of national currency will lead. And we can clearly perceive that this is a political problem, as I said, just as much as it is an economic one, which demands that we renew our analysis of capitalism, which is also to say our resistance to capitalism. that this renewal demands thought travel down anarchist paths, both left-wing and right-wing, is at the same time, without doubt, one of the most interesting philosophical challenges of our time. If only for this reason, cryptocurrencies must be defended, and this is why I signed the declaration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So, we have time for questions.
I just gave a co-directed a conference for DARPA FinTech. Something you might want to sort of add to this discussion is I think the declaration refers not so much to Jefferson but to Barlow in the late 90s, right? The Declaration of Internet Independence. And one of the things that is truly weird about the crypto enthusiasm, the blockchain enthusiasm, is its almost complete lack of historical sense. So almost all of the arguments about disintermediation in the state were made in the 90s when I was moving into securities, right? So we were going to disintermediate banks, we were going to disintermediate finance. None of that happened. And I've yet, so you might want to sort of think about or sort of interrogate the current enthusiasm, which I think this sort of explains a lot of the enthusiasm, is this notion of disintermediation and by extension authenticity that we will somehow achieve. But we've been here before, just a generation earlier, with remarkably similar technology. And that has not been the fate of the internet. And the DARPA people have been it. It's kind of fascinating watching the wheel turn and come back around. Just a thought.
Well, I don't think that we already had that. I think there's something radically new in this process.
Wow.
And algorithm as a process of trust. Of course, the internet. I understand what you mean. It was already the case with the internet, but the difference is that now it's what it touches on what we own, what we buy, what we sell, without any control. It's like when we use PayPal and we have to enter our bank passcode, etc. This will be over. It will be. I will be able to buy something from you through Facebook, for example, without entering any code, any password. I think this is something different.
Donna.
Done.
So you believe that there is no control over Facebook, right?
No, I did say that it was ambiguous. That precisely, Zuckerberg, as always, was accused of hiding a kind of hyper-control desire. Okay? That's the problem. This is what I tried to. I'm not defending. I didn't sign the declaration because I signed the declaration because I think we are in a very interesting moment in which the hyper-control trend and the anarchist, trend are, and Zuckerberg, for me, is an interesting figure. He incarnates that kind of. Yes.
Algorithms could perhaps be considered government by epistle, right? An algorithm is a decision which is made in advance and is written down. And AI is a decision that's made by feeding a lot of individual decisions and getting an aggregate decision from it, right? So an AI is going to reflect the prejudices of the people whose data are fed to it. An algorithm is going to reject the prejudices of the programmer or the programmer's employer. I don't know that they're radically different from law, for example.
Code is the law. This is one of their mottos. code is the law. The system of blockchain is requires a global transparency. So when you access it, you can read everything that has to be done. There is no, all transaction can be deciphered. This is the principle. Once you have access to it, it's entirely legible. And so secret, transactions, hidden things are not possible anymore. This is, as I said, it was a reaction against the financial crisis due to a lot of secret and control.
It's a huge scalability problem here, right? If you start running the global financial system through a single thing, you eventually run out of electric power, right?
Yeah, this is true. This is the problem.
Right.
Energy.
And so as a practical matter, you might be able to see a few recent transactions, but the problem of confidence remains. The problem, and we haven't even begun talking about exchanges. I'm something skeptical, right? But
No, I totally agree. And because now, in order to mine bitcoins, we potentially could. It's very famous that we cannot. And now it's only in China that some miners are mining the bitcoins. So it's very, very dark and very, I know. But my point, once again, is maybe beyond this phenomena, is to interrogate the new functioning of exchanges, and the disappearance of state control over many.
that I think is right.
Well, it seems to be homogenize a certain moment of history and project it into the present and contemporary period, that states have not always controlled money. Banks, regions, it's kind of a 20th century phenomenon, and a lot of it was captured within big world empires.
Mm-hmm.
And the question of was money, if you're talking about fiat money defined by states, that's one thing, but there's other kinds of money beyond fiat money that people accept as money, like this. And it's a currency, but then what constitutes a reserve monetary technology or unit, and what will drive it? Plus, if everything is open and transparent, that sounds marvelous to whatever, liberal fantasy people want to have, but sometimes secrets are good and sometimes privacy is desirable. And the fact that Facebook wants to know everything about you that you admit, but now everything about you that it can discern from blockchain transactions seems somewhat problematic. And that, again, the scalability question of this is going to be highly patchy and unbalanced. I think in the very rich countries it might be fairly useful. In very poor countries, people are still going to be probably passing off paper bills or other sorts of things. I don't think it's going to hide crime transactions, and I don't think it's going to hide, surreptitious, clandestine government actions or organized crime actions. It seems it's an interesting idea, and in turn, is it not captured within the current existing computing technologies of binary von Neumann architectures that are probably about to be blown out of the water by quantum technologies in terms of computing? So it isn't necessarily undefeatable or spoofable. So it sounds good. Sure, let's give it a go. But from a lot of perspectives, is everything that's free and transparent necessarily good?
So thank you very much. There are many things in the question. Once again, I didn't intend to judge the value of this. I'm not saying this is good, this is bad. I'm just trying to understand what's going on, which is that in many aspects of our lives, we are confronted already, even if we don't pay with cryptocurrency, we are confronted with that kind of technological, horizontal functioning. We can rent our apartments, our B&Bs. Uber is a good example as well. In many,
we as the upper middle class Western rich.
Okay, so Zuckerberg would say
That's
that
a kind of bourgeois
for example,
illusion.
his project of the Libra was also to allow poor people
Yeah.
who don't have access to bank accounts to be able to make exchanges through Facebook. So we can return the argument. Of course, I agree it's for the super rich, but it is also helping people without bank accounts. In Afghanistan, it's used in certain regions in order
It's been going on
to
for 20 years with existing
identify people without IDs.
Yeah.
Okay, things like that. So once again, I just wanted to insist upon the ambiguity, the extreme paradoxical power of these technologies.
Yeah, no,
I don't
true.
think it's good or bad. Who knows?
Well, I think it's probably both. Who uses it for what purpose? It's like the dark net, the dark
Except
web.
that this one is not dark.
It is too.
I mean, it depends on what side you're standing on,
Wayne?
And I don't want to make technical objections because I think you've highlighted a crucial set of changes that we need to think about very carefully. And I'm grateful for that. I think we all want to understand this, but I wasn't sure exactly what kind of resource we use to understand this. And I got a bit less clear when you brought in Rifkin, Masumi, and Manning. Manning's been writing this sort of stuff for 20 years, Masumi for longer. They've written a whole series of books, none of which are coherent. They try to overthrow rational agency theory, but they can't distinguish an act from an action. So they fail analytical tests, these people. Rifkin is different. He's a very exciting journalist, and I read him with great enthusiasm. But no one would suggest that any of those people could understand anything in a technically exact sense. I don't accuse you of falling into these traps, but because I don't think we can do it yet. But have you any
Of
idea?
course, we're not specialists. I'm
No,
not
of
a,
course.
I'm not a.
But
But then it doesn't mean that we cannot talk about.
I strongly
that.
support
if we-
talking about. But
Rifkin
how
is
can
very
it's a
interesting.
question it is very interesting, and you've interested us. How can we intensify our control understanding? How can we get a less journalistic understanding? Because that's where we're at in a way. We are not technically competent enough to fully understand, but I think we can get a real understanding of these things. But how can we do it, do you think?
Well, I didn't. Maybe I failed. Have the impression that what I presented was entirely journalistic, but.
No, not that what you said is journalistic, but that's our situation as people trying to understand this technical
Well, yeah, first, I think that it is impossible to conceptualize things like mutual aid or any political problem without taking technology into account. I think this is impossible. So when we talk about communities, minimum wage, basic income, anything, we have to take into account that this will go through the internet. There are no other ways. And even in very poor countries and even everywhere, I think now we can't find a region of the world that wouldn't be in the web. So, and of course, the problem is that it's not only a means, internet is not only a means like a telephone, or it is a political organization in itself. so that the problem is not how we are going to master the internet or fold it into our political visions or plans, but how will we deal with its political power? I think there are no other ways. It's not the old time when you could think of technology as just a means. I think if it ever existed, it is over. So now, how can we have a concept of cooperation, solidarity, etc., without, and I think this is Rifkin's project, without re-elaborating on the technological commons, communities. So this is what I try to. I agree with you, perhaps Manning, and well, it was interesting because in Canada, in Quebec, you have these attempts at using the blockchain in order to develop solidarity chains, etc. That's why I alluded to that.
So, I'm going to ask a question now. And it's about what we were talking about before, about the state. Because I guess I'm wondering whether, let's see, I guess the first question is the extent to which the state is actually what we really want in order to make sort of political but ethical decisions about the economy, and that we in fact really want state control of the money supply and currency, because we want to be able to have sort of democratic and collective control over the structure of the economy. So that's the first question. Whether we actually prefer state control rather than this sort of type of currency that's beyond state control. And then the second question is, if we do want that, isn't it very easy to maintain that as long as the state says, look, this is not going to be legal tender, it's not going to be something that we're allowed to use as currency? Can't the state always make that decision and always really block out the possibility of this type of cryptocurrency?
At the moment, yes, the state can always stop it, like they did with the Libra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But won't the state always have an interest in
No.
doing that, and won't it always be able to do that? I guess that's one.
I don't think so,
Why not?
because the state is has to exist today by a kind of super development of violence. The state has already disappeared. This is not my opinion. Marx already said it. Gramsci that the state is just an empty shell. It's getting more and more obvious every day. I mean, well, I'm French, so we were very much within the welfare state. As you know, republicanism in France is very, very powerful. Like school, university are free. I think that France was the country with Sweden of the welfare state, okay? And it is very clear today that this is disappearing totally. I mean, what's happening now in France with all the protests, etc., is precisely about that. That the state is not providing us with anything it used to provide before.
Yeah.
This is just so what remains of the state, outside of course a few, it is the ultra violence. It's incredible how strongly the protests are repressed. It's what Rancière calls police over politics. So it does mean, I think, something about the state. I think so. I don't see why this violence would be necessary otherwise. What is the state today outside a kind of auto-proclaimed, you know? I mean, everything happens outside. Of course, I'm provoking you.
I'll take
I think that one of the things I've noticed about the question and answer that has to do with most of us only having a journalistic appreciation of these issues is that technologists and economists they protect their priestly grasp on their expertise in their area with all kinds of obfuscation, and so we could all have read different articles and have disagreements that aren't even disagreements because of the false complexity, right, of the promoters of those things. So I don't know how much we can talk about those pieces, right? But you brought up something significant about trust and about algorithms replacing trust, cryptographic proof replacing trust. I have 3 different thoughts about that come from 3 different commenters on technology, including blockchain. One of them is Yasha Levine, he's a journalist who wrote a book called Surveillance Valley. And he essentially argues that all of the major tech monopolists in the United States have been military contractors from their birth, that the internet was a military project, that early surveillance of leftists in the 70s was the first major project that ARPA took on. And that essentially the government is partially, the CIA and the DoD store their data in the Amazon cloud, right? So the government is not just an empty shell, the government is deeply involved with organizations that are telling us to trust them instead of it. And in many ways, we're still trusting the government.
For David, for me, the government is not the state.
Okay. Okay. The second is from your friends, the Invisible Committee wrote a book called For Our Friends that they talk about a concept of cybernetic governance, and it's very trendy in certain circles. She's rolling her eyes. But one of the things that's interesting about their way of thinking about big tech and trust the algorithm and trust cryptographic proof is that they think about tech monopolies and technologies as being sort of in the realm, I think, of like the Catholic Church being involved in the care of souls, that the state is involved in one level of care, and that this transnational state-ish thing is being produced in our time, which wants our trust instead of us giving our trust to the state. And the third is Matt Stoller, who writes on monopolies. He just published a book called Goliath. And he says that no billionaire gets their billions through producing things. They get their billions by standing at a place and erecting a toll booth. And that's definitely what Facebook has done. It stood at a place in our relationships and placed itself as this trusted partner between me and thee in the realm of sharing news, in the realm of chatting, and potentially in the realm of monetary transactions. So the cryptocurrencies, many of them are not allied with a monopoly like Facebook.
Yeah.
But in the end, will they be captured by monopolies who see that this is a place in which they can extort a toll from human relationships by placing themselves, identifying a place where trust is required and trying to monopolize that trust? That's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But once again, I think we are in this full ambiguous.
Mhm.
I think that you just highlighted this once again. It's very interesting, but yes, it's both this kind of hyper surveillance and at the same time the possibility of something else. You know that at Irvine, David, there's a big group around the blockchain.
Yes, I do.
It's very interesting. I learned everything from that.
Yeah, picking up on your state question, I just wondered the effect and how this will shape the citizen or citizenship relationship with the state, let alone with the government. In a sense, taxation is one of the fundamental relations. You take money and so on.
Of course.
Also, obligations, maybe service and other obligations. So what you're suggesting is not just a deconstruction of the state, but a very undermining the very essence of the citizen-state relationship.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I think this notion is disappearing.
Of citizenship.
Yeah.
And indeed of
Yes.
countervailing powers in society. You talked about Gilets jaunes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously organised, but basically not
Anonymous.
anonymous,
Mm.
yes. So it's
That's
not
very
only
interesting.
citizen, but social movements of a traditional formal organisational form, an old-fashioned TOU or something.
I mean,
No, this is very interesting. Or maybe we can reconstruct the notion of citizenship through technology.
That's the other way.
Yeah, that's the other way. It's very interesting.
I mean, my sense is that, you know, precisely things like sort of new populist nationalism is really the indication that all of that disappears in the face of a reassertion of nation-state sovereignty. And, I guess the will of the people to make decisions about their economic life.
Yes.
To the point where, you know, the United States has, I guess, well, the Trump administration has threatened, global trade by putting up the sort of setting up the tariff, the trade war, in a way that would, really negate a lot of the power of capitalism to manage these trade flows independently of the state, and really reasserting state power to establish, the final authority.
Yes, but
in
you can see
determining
that as a
price.
kind of reaction against.
But it's
It won't last forever.
I think it could last as long as the people have the will to do that. And so
But
that
we
would
won't
be
have
the-
it all. I mean,
Because the economy is going to recede in the face of those political changes. I mean, you saw the same thing with Al Qaeda and the whole war on terror, where you all of a sudden, overnight after 9/11, you saw this transformation where you said all of this economic stuff pales, just disappears once you have a reassertion of elements of sovereignty and state power. So anyway, that's again the next question. I'm sorry to intervene.
Chair's privilege.
State authoritarian.
There was a comment about confidence without confidence or trust without trust, and I thought about Derrida's notion of religion without religion. And I think about God and the state and how somebody like Olivier Roy wants to argue against this decline of religion, but rather argue for a reformatting of religious intensity, or maybe religion in terms of intensity rather than belief structures or something. And so I'm wondering how that would play in, because I felt like it was very common in the 60s and 70s to predict or identify the decline of the religious or religion, but it's been the contrary. And a number of scholars have actually retracted earlier writings and said, well, actually, no, that's not what was anticipated. And I'm wondering how that factors into some of these groupings that people have been talking about, specifically because the language of trust, confidence gets lifted up. So I don't know how religion doesn't get talked, like in terms of our attachment or our time, attention, energy, devotion, whatever. I'm just curious about how that would play out in the midst of this internal war that's going on that you've named.
yes, this is very interesting. I do think that behind this kind of inhuman, in a certain sense, entirely technological trust, or absence of trust, or
Yeah.
replacement of
Right.
trust,
Right.
the new messianism
Yeah.
is operating,
Yeah.
of course. But without God.
Yeah.
It's and I think I read somewhere that the Vatican was extremely into the blockchain.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and that there was a project of cryptocurrency within. Yes. Because of course, I think you're totally right. It's not a de-fetishization, recreation, I think, of a certain kind of course.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Philip Goodchild's work, Theology of Money, and subsequently, right, and was it means, medium, and holder of value, and so we've talked about value a lot too, the reestablishment or recreation of value.
Value, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's very true. And I think there was some.
I wanted your thoughts perhaps on, perhaps it's a provocative use of the term anarchism that you purposely use it, obviously because the theorists like Vienna, etc., that are anti-statist in many ways, but do believe in hierarchies, do believe in power differentiations, do believe in huge inequalities, how far we can associate their philosophy with the term anarchism or even anarcho-capitalism, which, you know, a huge segment of the anarchist tradition rejects them as they're not part of the family.
Yes, I know.
And I obviously, you know that. And the other question I had was about the class war amongst the elements of the bourgeoisie themselves, or the capitalist class themselves. The McAfee, you know, this kind of almost caricature, new El Dorado type. When you see his interviews, you wonder, like, what's going through this? Is this some kind of psyop from the government? Really, truly, or is he? You know, what do they? Are they a new, insane, psychopathic branch of the capitalist class that's breaking off to some fantastical new world order? And I just wanted your thoughts.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. But the second part of the question, of course, I mean, these people are disgusting.
Thank you. I feel much better now.
I once again, I'm not defending them. I want to be clear. But if that's the case, why are they? Why do they exist? What's going on? I mean, if really these people are just a bunch of you know, crazy, as you said, why are they?
Yes, they have the public security.
Why are they talking about this, etc., this currency phenomenon? Why these groups around Rothbard, you know, this new reading of Hayek, etc., around the denationalization of money, etc.? Why that, if not something internal to capitalism today? I take that very seriously. I'm not, once again, defending them, but I said, what's going on? I mean, if it was just an isolated phenomenon, we could say, well, but it's not. It is not. And so many banks, as I said themselves, start to use the blockchain. In Venezuela, they tried to develop the petrol, you know, that was a cryptocurrency.
In Montreal, it's quite. In Montreal, there are the progressive experts, but they're
exactly. So it's not only a kind of psychotic, or if it is a psychosis, it is internal to capitalism. And capitalism and schizophrenia.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's a long idea. And the first one, of course, many left-wing anarchists would say, well, what are you doing? What you're talking about has nothing to do with anarchy. So as it happened, I'm working on anarchism, and so I'm rereading all the basic texts like Kropotkin, Bakunin, and all that. But I do think that it is impossible today to work on anarchism without taking into account these new phenomena. Otherwise, we will have a kind of archaic, reactive vision of left-wing anarchism without. We have to take the, as I said, the technological, political dimension of anarchism into account. It's impossible otherwise. Because the communes, mutual aids are, once again, all these little things we're talking about, even if they're small, I mean, solidarity systems, they go through the internet. So they necessarily encounter these issues of who is in charge, who is in control, etc. So the frontier exists, but it's very thin.
No, but many anarcho-syndicalists became fascists. Like, these are real. These are dangerous. You know, this is my point. Is that.
No, I mean, of course, I'm not saying it's the same, but well, in philosophy in general, I don't believe in like strict dualities. I think if you touch on a thing by saying I don't want to see the contrary, then
it comes with.
Yeah.
Ken?
Thank you for the presentation. It reminded me for a moment of that novel Atlas Shrugged, by Ayn Rand, where the protagonists who are resisting their society decide to make their own money and leave. And they just leave and leave society to its own fate. I'm curious, because of the technological drive that these people are using, will this anarchism extend to other technologies? And I'm particularly thinking about genetic technology and biotechnology. Over in China, some guy all by himself decided to re-engineer some children in terms of their underlying, germline genetics. It seems to be that there's a similar anarchism, a philosophy, a spirit that animate these folks across a whole range of technological tools, which could be both good or dangerous. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about that.
Wow, this well, thank you so much. It's very interesting. Well, I think that we should open banks of stem cells, of genomes, I'm for a democratization of all the biological, how can you say that, material. So in that sense, but it's not the case at all at the moment. I think we should have a kind of communal organizations of these data. That it is not the case at all, but they are very protected and ethically, supposedly ethically censored, etc. But yes, I do think that anarchy might absolutely be extended to these problems, but it would imply a totally different social organization.
I think I'm sort of sensing. I said there were particular moments in this conversation, and also in your talk, where I actually sensed something that felt to me true to anarchy as a project of the commons, right? And I know that there's sort of a fundamental antagonism to Masumi and Manning in the room, so maybe I can risk something by bringing them back up. But there's the thing that sort of it reminded me also of what you had said about how one of the fundamental things about relation that we're trying to get at is this idea of touch and traces, this capacity for us to touch each other and be entangled with each other materially in ways that propose fundamental divergences to what it is to be a unit or an individual or a self, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea that Masumi and Manning propose, its political import for me is like a notion of togetherness where we are not units who come together to assemble, to remain separate units who then decide collectively to do something, right, together. No, like our potential, what we do in a room together, fundamentally exceeds our accounting and our capacity to look around and say, okay, there are 10 of us, right? And so for me, like a notion of anarchy has something to do with a collectivity that is interested in mix and trace and touch, right? And this sort of like messy rub that happens when we feel some kind of common relation, right? And
yes.
Yeah, I just want to bring that back into the room because I think that is the room, right?
Yes.
That is the condition of a possibility for any of this. And so if we, and that's also sort of like the fundamental tension that I see with like an algorithm. Algorithms are there to narrow to the precisest margin the degree of possibility, right? Our job, if it is a job, is to, what was the exact quote? Hold on. Mobilize a surplus of organizing potential, right? There is so much we can do. That, to me, is the spirit of anarchy, is to be in touch with what it is that we can do together, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It is also very interesting. And thank you all for your questions. They were really nice. I thought you would reject everything I said. Because people usually, they don't like these topics. But anyway, so here I will, you were mentioning Derrida, I think I will reintroduce him here. Because I agree with you that, of course, contact and togetherness and I don't know how to call that, animality almost.
Yes.
If we talk about Kropotkin, are extremely important, and I'm not advocating at all for kind of disappearance of that, of course not. But Derrida taught me that even the most immediate contact is always mediated by some sort of technology. Even if it's not the internet, of course, or the blockchain, there's always something that he calls heteroaffection. There's always something other than, when he criticized Malabou touching touch, it says, no, when my right hand touches my left hand, the contact is impossible. Right. Huh? So this is my question to you. Do you think that mutual, let's say, touch is possible, or isn't it always mediated by a distance? Or otherwise, this morning when we were talking about les foules, about le bon,
Crowd.
Canetti said, okay, the crowd can be fusional and dangerous also. If we think of togetherness without any,
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of Fragment when he calls it repulsion, like repulsion and rub, right? But it's just fundamentally bad physics to think that you touch something, right? And are not also fundamentally repelled,
yes,
right?
Right.
And I think and I can't speak for Fred, but what I think he might be getting at is this fundamental, difference, right? Like this idea that it installs a sort of gap where you can sort of deviate, and in that deviation emerges complexity, which is Kropotkin's fundamental definition of nature, right? Is that its nature is to deviate. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, this morning when we talked about Kropotkin, I was expecting you to say that this imminent trend toward mutual aid had to be constructed in the human. Because it's obvious in animals, but in human beings, it has to be, it's not like continuous.
Right.
It exists in parrots and apes and then in us. Social interest has to be re-elaborated.
Yeah.
So I think it goes through technology of some kind.
Of course.
No?
Yeah.
No.
Gene, you have something?
Hi, I came in late and I just caught the last portion of what you said when you were talking about, talking about, but it wasn't stem cell, what was the phrase?
The bank of stem cells?
Yes. Develop sort of your philosophic rationale for that.
I think it's another topic.
Okay.
Very, very briefly.
No problem.
The idea that stem cells therapies are at the moment very difficult to get. That they are not democratic at all, except for birds, but otherwise they are really reserved for an elite. And so, on the contrary, if we had open stem cells banks, we could use them more easily. So, but this is another problem, like ethics concern often hide, in fact, a capitalistic organization of these biological elements.
So what would be the criteria that you would establish to put limits on where that kind of science would go?
You mean embryos?
Yes, or any of the other ways that people are experimenting in terms of biotechnology.
Personally, I don't want to. I would have no limits.
Okay.
But
Okay.
or very, very little.
And your abolition of limits would be predicated on the view that there were no circumstances under which there should be limitations imposed?
Of what?
Look, it's now more than science fiction. The way the biotechnology and all of the experimentation is going on, right? I mean, and you're saying, well, no, just let it rip. Yes.
Well, I think, of course, when I say I don't want to be too provocative, of course, I
Well, that's okay. I mean,
we a
that's
certain
your job.
certain set of limits, but I think that's under the name of these limits, I mean, the system is prohibiting a democratization of the new biomedical techniques, and that I find that outrageous.
So there shouldn't be limits.
I think that the
Ethical
argument
limits
that,
based on.
an abandoned embryo project. I don't know how to say that in English.
Yeah, but let's say that there were vulnerable
I
populations.
see no problem in using this.
Well, there are all kinds of problems that could conceivably emerge when this biological science was applied to contain, modify, restrain, limit the freedom of, subordinate populations that were viewed as surplus. So your view would be, let it happen, since there are no limits.
I mean, no, well,
I
think
maybe I misunderstood. No, I'm sorry. No, my bad.
No, I didn't say that, but I think that once again, I think there are many pathologies that could be cured with a larger democratization of biological material. And that's most often, the ethical concerns are in fact, they are not that ethical.
So there's no downside to this. That doesn't make any sense.
Well,
So I think there are some different conversations in this landscape going on. One is to be modest in my assessment. There's the question of the state's supervision of extra state currency. There's the question of state or not state control of emerging technologies. But I do want to clarify the conversation you just had a moment ago about relationality. And you picked up this morning the comment from a physicist about that existence is interaction, and we bear the traces of that with which we have interacted, directly or through a chain of interactions. So what I wanted to clarify, and this didn't come up this morning, is that when I spoke about relationality as distinction amid relation, not as a bowl of Jell-O.
Oh,
right? We are really, but it's not about the blob.
Right.
And that's extremely important because the blob becomes top-down oppression or across conformity pressures, right? So groupness absent an understanding and appreciation of distinction is a disaster. And when physicists or neurobiologists or evolutionary biologists talk about interaction, they are talking about interaction, not blobness. And so what I was looking for this morning in terms of relationality as a framework for public policy or mutual social policies or economic policies is relationality is distinction amid relation. Neither one of them, that's not a binary. It's, as I said, it's mutual constitution.
Right.
But mutual constitution means there's stuff to be mutual in, right? I mean, it's, and I think when we consider the more pragmatic questions of state and extra state currency and what kind of economics we want and what kind of finance we want and so on, we have to keep relationality as distinction amid relation in mind. Just to clarify.
That's very true. Totally agree.
I think especially what's important, and you see it in Hannah Arendt's. There's actually a really beautiful book where it picks out all of the places in Hannah Arendt where she talks about the social, And the social emerges as this blob, right? And it's this thing which swallows up your capacity for political action, right? It contains, and she has a few words with it, parking driving, and then there's, right? Yeah, so, right, and it's this sort of, yeah, so, right. So I think that's just one of the places where biology and politics can yeah, right.
Okay, so I'd like to thank
Thank you.